I love to tell stories that linger, stories that echo long after the final word. Before we dive into this one, a quick like and subscribe is always appreciated. Thank you.
And now, let us begin, not with a fanfare, but with a quiet discovery that shattered 2 decades of silence.
Take your warm cup of coffee, make yourself comfortable, and listen closely. The story is about to begin.
The year was 2004. Summer had painted the forests outside Grants Pass, Oregon in shades of deep emerald, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and pine. 2 hikers, seeking a shortcut through the wilderness, paused for a well-earned rest. Their chosen spot? The ancient, exposed roots of a fallen Douglas fir, its immense form sprawled across the forest floor, a casualty of some forgotten storm. The ground beneath them was a tapestry of rich, dark soil, broken open where the colossal roots had torn free, leaving behind a raw, primal wound in the earth. As one of the men adjusted his heavy pack, his gaze drifted to the exposed soil, the tangle of roots. And there, glinting with a faint, almost ethereal light amidst the dark, damp earth, he saw it. A silver wristwatch. Its metallic band was deeply corroded, the once clear glass face now a spiderweb of cracks. Years of silent growth had allowed moss to creep across its surface, a verdant shroud attempting to reclaim the man-made object. Yet despite the decay, the elegant shape was unmistakable. He reached down, his fingers closing around the cold metal. He turned it over in his hand, letting the filtered sunlight catch its tarnished surface. And then, on the back, almost swallowed by years of rust and neglect, 3 words emerged, etched with a delicate precision that time could not entirely erase. Love. Anna. 1983. The hikers, grasping the profound significance of their find, immediately turned the watch over to the county sheriff. Within a single day, the faded inscription on its back yielded a startling confirmation. This corroded timepiece belonged to William Cartwright, a name long whispered in hushed tones in Grants Pass. William, a 39-year-old single father, had vanished without a trace back in the scorching July of 1983. For his daughter, Anna, then a vibrant teenager, the sight of that watch, even in its broken state, would tear open a wound that had never truly healed. It was the Father's Day gift she had painstakingly chosen for him, a cherished tradition they'd shared since her hands were small enough to grasp trinkets from the local drugstore. Now, 21 years later, her youthful handwriting still lived, almost defiantly, in that weathered engraving. William's case had long been relegated to the archives, a file gathering dust under the chilling label of cold. The last day anyone saw him alive was July 16, 1983. He had dropped Anna off at a classmate's lively birthday party at the YMCA pool, a promise hanging in the air between them. "I'll be back at 6. He never arrived. His Oldsmobile, an anchor to his last known moments, was discovered the following morning, parked with an eerie precision on a turnout along River Road. The doors were locked, his wallet and keys still inside, untouched. A silent tableau of a life interrupted. Curiously, tucked within the glove compartment, deputies found the instruction manual for his watch, folded with meticulous care. Search parties were immediately mobilized. Deputies, accompanied by their keen-nosed dogs, scoured the dense forest. Volunteers, fueled by hope and fear, combed every inch of brush, their eyes straining for any sign. Divers plunged into the murky depths of the river, their powerful lights cutting through the darkness. Yet the wilderness offered no answers. No footprints, no torn fragments of clothing, no violent signs of struggle. It was as if William Cartwright had simply stepped out of his car and, in a breath, dissolved into the very air of Oregon. In the harrowing days that followed, flyers bearing William's gentle smile appeared in every store window, every gas station. His hair was neatly parted, his gaze kind, and on his left wrist, clearly visible, was the silver watch his daughter had given him just weeks before. The stark headline screamed, "Father Missing. Last seen July 16th." Anna's mother had passed away years prior, leaving her as the sole child of a man who had vanished into the unknown. That watch, no longer mere jewelry, became a symbol, his anchor, a constant gleaming presence in every family photograph, a silent testament to a love that now hung suspended in uncertainty. The exhaustive search stretched through the long, anxious weeks of August. Deputies meticulously logged interviews with his coworkers from the lumber mill, his friends from the church softball team, and neighbors who swore they'd seen him jogging just the week before. One acquaintance noted he seemed unusually distracted lately, his eyes often drifting, lost in thought during conversations. Another remembered a chilling comment. William had confided that he felt somebody was watching him near the very turnout where his car would later be found. Yet investigators in 1983 had nothing concrete. Without a body, without a crime scene, the fragile threads of the case frayed and ultimately snapped. By 1984, William Cartwright's file was officially consigned to the cold case drawer, another unsolved mystery in a world full of them. Anna, left with a gaping void of unanswered questions, grew up under the shadow of her father's disappearance. She graduated high school, his smiling face still staring out from faded bulletin boards. On her own wrist, she wore a replica of his lost watch, a tangible link to the original that had vanished with him. Every Father's Day, a poignant ritual unfolded. She would lay flowers at the quiet turnout where his Oldsmobile had been found, a lonely offering to the unknown. And with each passing year, she wrestled with the same agonizing question. Had he willingly walked into those whispering woods, or had something far darker followed him there? When the watch, a ghost from the past, resurfaced in 2004, investigators felt the crushing weight of 2 decades collapse in an instant. Here was proof, rusted, moss-covered, cracked, that William hadn't simply chosen to walk away. His watch had been buried deep in the soil, hidden by the relentless embrace of roots, resting in silent vigil for 20 long years, until the raw power of a storm toppled the mighty tree that guarded its secret. Deputies, meticulous in their work, photographed the watch exactly where it lay before carefully bagging it as evidence. The engraved words, though faded, were still defiantly legible. Love, Anna, 1983. This singular find ripped open the cold case, sending detectives hurtling back into dusty files, back into long dormant interviews, and back into the long-stretching shadow of a man who had simply vanished in broad daylight. For Anna, now a woman grown with children of her own, the discovery was a devastating blow, yet also a flicker of hope. She spoke to reporters, her voice raw with emotion. "That watch was the last thing I gave him. If it's here, it means he was here, and it means he didn't leave on his own." Her words, sharp with renewed grief and conviction, reignited the investigation. subtly shifting its focus from a mere missing persons case to the chilling prospect of a crime scene. The forest floor had yielded an object, a profound clue, but it had not yet given up William. Not yet. As detectives in 2004 once again pried open William Cartwright's file, their first solemn act was to revisit the original investigation from 1983. The reports, now yellowed with age, spoke in the clipped, clinical tone of an earlier era. Vehicle located July 17, 1983, 06:35 hours, one deputy's precise hand had noted. No signs of forced entry, no signs of struggle. Yet in the margin of another report, almost a whisper from the past, a younger officer had scribbled a single, seemingly minor detail. Watch. It was a throwaway observation then, but now, with the corroded timepiece lying in an evidence bag, it resonated like a haunting, terrible echo. William Cartwright was not the kind of man who simply vanished. His life was a tapestry woven with steady threads, reliable hours at the timber mill, spirited softball games on weekends, unwavering presence in church on Sundays. Neighbors recalled him as that rare, devoted father who, despite his daughter nearing her teenage years, still thoughtfully packed her school lunches. Friends described him as a quiet soul, kind and deeply grieving the loss of his wife, yet pouring every ounce of his love and energy into raising Anna. His life was rooted, predictable, and remarkably visible. This very steadfastness made his sudden, inexplicable disappearance all the more chilling. In the week leading to his vanishing, a subtle shift had occurred. Co-workers noted William seemed distracted, his mind elsewhere. One colleague remembered him staring intently at the distant tree line during a lunch break, murmuring softly, whispering, "Feels like someone's out there." Another recalled William checking his watch repeatedly, a nervous tick, as if perpetually waiting for some unseen appointment. These small oddities went unreported until after he was gone, when every minor behavior suddenly swelled with a grim, retrospective significance. On the evening of July 16th, the invitation to Anna's birthday party remained pinned to the family refrigerator, a bright promise now tinged with sorrow. Anna vividly remembered her father's smile as he dropped her off at the YMCA pool, his parting words a firm, loving promise. "I'll be back at 6. Don't forget your towel." It was the last full sentence she would ever hear from him. At 6:15 p.m., when his Oldsmobile hadn't appeared, the birthday girl's mother kindly offered to call William's home. No answer. By 7 p.m., a cold dread began to set in, blooming into full-blown panic by midnight. Deputies launched a frantic search, their vehicles carving paths through the darkened streets. The next morning, less than 5 miles from the YMCA, they found his Oldsmobile. It was parked neatly at a turnout, almost too perfectly. No mud marred the tires, no sign of a hurried departure. Inside, his wallet lay untouched, brimming with cash. His keys rested in the console, an ordinary domestic detail now fraught with mystery. And in the glove compartment, tucked away with careful precision, was the instruction booklet for the silver wristwatch. Deputies found it odd, yes, but not immediately alarming. Perhaps he'd gone for a jog, or walked into the quiet woods to clear his head. Search dogs, their instincts keen, followed William's scent from the car, tracing it into the dense brush. But then, abruptly, the trail vanished. After only 40 yards, the scent simply ended. Deputies noted the chilling detail. Line ended abruptly. No further sign. It was as if William Cartwright had stepped off the path and simply evaporated into the Oregon air. Rumors, insidious and swift, began to spread through the small town. Some whispered of hidden debts, of unseen enemies.
Others speculated about a secret lover, a desperate flight to start a new life. Yet there was no shred of evidence, no clandestine relationships, no unaccounted-for money, no farewell note. Anna, her voice tight with grief and conviction, insisted her father would never abandon her. She was all I had, and I was all he had, she told deputies in her raw first interview. He wouldn't just leave.
The sheriff's department organized exhaustive grid searches. Volunteers, their faces etched with grim determination, combed riverbanks, peered into forgotten barns, and tramped across vast fields. Helicopters, their blades slicing through the air, scanned the dense tree canopy from above. Nothing surfaced. The sole flicker of a clue came from a truck driver who reported seeing a man walking near the turnout at dusk. He described a tall figure clad in a plaid shirt and jeans. It could have been William, or it could have been anyone. The lead, tantalizing but inconclusive, faded into nothingness. By the fall of 1983, the case had inevitably stalled. Without a body, without a crime scene, investigators had no charges to pursue, no clear direction to follow. William's file, once a desperate plea, was moved into the cold case drawer, destined to sit in silent vigil for more than 2 decades. For Anna, life continued, but forever marked by an absence she could never explain, a ghost at every feast. Each milestone, graduation, marriage, the birth of her own children, was haunted by the empty space her father should have occupied. When the watch was finally unearthed in 2004, it was more than just an artifact. It was a lens, refracting the old evidence in a terrifying new light. Why had the instruction booklet been left so neatly in the car? Why had William confided to coworkers that he felt watched? And most chillingly, why was this watch, the singular gift that inextricably linked him to his daughter, buried beneath a tree 2 decades later? It suggested not accident, but movement. Not loss, but concealment. Not chance, but intent. Someone had taken William from that turnout. Someone had deliberately discarded the watch, planting it where the relentless roots would eventually embrace and hide it. The watch was no mere relic. It was a clue, preserved by the patient hand of time and the indifferent forces of weather. Detectives interviewed Anna again, now in her late 30s, a woman bearing the quiet strength of enduring sorrow. She produced the replica watch she had worn for years, a ghost of the original. The real one had a scratch on the band right here, she said, her finger tracing a familiar bend in the metal. The watch they found, it bore the identical mark. "That's his," she choked out, her voice cracking with the weight of years. "If they found the watch, maybe he's still out there. Or maybe someone put it there to make sure we'd never know." The 2004 task force, circling the worn pages of the case file, zeroed in on 3 haunting words. Last seen alone. William had vanished in plain daylight in a populated town from a public turnout. That was the profound paradox. People don't simply vanish in sunlight, not without some dark, unseen assistance. By the winter of 2004, investigators were meticulously combing through every name, every connection to William Cartwright's life in 1983. The watch had reignited not only the case, but a firestorm of painful speculation. The reignited investigation in 2004 sent deputies back into the well-trodden paths of memory. They interviewed coworkers, old neighbors, even the jovial men from the church softball league. Everyone offered a memory, a snippet of the past. But memories, like old photographs, age poorly. Some swore William had been a happy man, content in his quiet life. Others insisted he'd seemed tense, burdened by some unseen weight. A few recalled him mentioning, weeks before his disappearance, seeing an unfamiliar truck idling near the turnout, a detail that now, in retrospect, sent a shiver down their spines. The sheer volume of contradictions, rather than clarifying the mystery, only seemed to make it heavier, more impenetrable. The task force, undeterred, began to focus on three distinct threads of inquiry. The first thread led them back to William's workplace, the saw line at the timber mill. It was a place of grueling hours, deafening noise, and simmering conflicts. One foreman vividly recalled a heated dispute between William and a younger, volatile employee named Dennis Avery. Avery had accused William of being a snitch, claiming he'd reported safety violations. That same Dennis Avery had abruptly left town in late 1983, vanishing southward to California. Detectives meticulously tracked him down in 2004. Now in his 40s, Avery vehemently denied any involvement in William's disappearance. He admitted to a simmering dislike for William, but claimed his sudden departure was simply for better work. His alibi for the weekend of July 16, 1983, was flimsy at best. Probably home, maybe with friends. No one, after all these years, could confirm his story.
The second thread pulled them back to the truck driver, the lone witness who claimed to have seen a man walking near the turnout at dusk. In 1983, deputies had logged the report and dismissed it. In 2004, they pressed harder. The driver, now retired, told a more detailed story. The man, he recalled, looked utterly confused, as if lost, unsure of his direction. He confessed he never stopped, only glimpsed the figure in his rearview mirror. Could have been Cartwright, he mused, or just some guy walking. But his words, though vague, added another unsettling layer of uncertainty. If it was William, why was he walking away from his neatly locked car? And if it wasn't William, then who else was out there that fateful evening? The third, and perhaps most troubling thread, came directly from William's own words. Co-workers and friends had consistently recalled him saying he felt watched in the weeks before he vanished. One friend even remembered William refusing to jog near the river trail because something about it didn't feel right. This phrasing, heard again in 2004, struck investigators as chillingly prescient. The very turnout where his car had been found sat barely a mile from that same river trail. Had someone been following him? Was William Cartwright, this ordinary, predictable man, a targeted victim? Detectives revisited the turnout itself. In 1983, it had been a simple dirt patch along River Road. By 2004, nature had begun to reclaim it, but the fundamental geography remained. The winding road, the small turnout, the dense tree line, the silent river. They stood where William's Oldsmobile had been parked, painstakingly picturing the scene. The car, locked. The keys still in the console. The wallet, untouched. If William had stepped out willingly, logically, he would have locked his car, taken his keys. If he had been forced, brutally abducted, why were there no signs of a struggle? No shattered glass, no disturbed earth. The unnatural neatness of the scene, its almost pristine quality, gnawed at every detective who studied it.
The recovered watch only complicated matters further. It wasn't simply lost, dropped by accident. It had been buried, pressed deep into the earth, hidden beneath the intertwining roots of a tree for 2 long decades. That suggested deliberate action. Someone had placed it there. But why hide a watch and not a body? Why painstakingly conceal a clue so small, unless the act itself was symbolic, a chilling message. One detective, his voice low, ventured a grim theory. If you wanted to erase a man, you'd get rid of his face or his name. If you wanted to mock a man, you'd bury his watch. Anna was called in again, her heart heavy, to view the watch under the sterile glare of glass. She wept quietly, the years of stoicism crumbling. "That's his," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I know it." Her words, heavy with certainty, carried immense weight for the investigators, yet offered no new answers. For her, the object was a heartbreaking confirmation that her father had not, in fact, abandoned her. For the seasoned investigators, it served as a stark, chilling reminder. Someone else, undeniably, had a hand in William's profound disappearance. The press, ever hungry for a compelling narrative, seized upon the story. Headlines blared, "Father's watch found after 21 years." Old, faded photographs of William circulated once more. His plaid shirts, his gentle, somewhat tired smile, suddenly alive again on front pages, resurrected from the depths of time. Residents of Grants Pass, stirred from their routines, remembered the frantic search, the ubiquitous flyers, the agonizing, unanswered questions. Coffee shops buzzed with renewed theories. Had he been killed by someone he knew? A betrayal cloaked in familiarity? Had he stumbled upon some illicit activity near the river? Poachers, drug runners, someone with a secret too deadly to expose? Or had he, in a moment of despair or disorientation, simply walked into the silent woods and never walked out?
Detectives chased every lead, every whisper of a possibility, but each trail ended in the same frustrating silence. Dennis Avery remained suspicious, a shadow in the periphery, but utterly unproven. The truck driver's account, while lending texture to the narrative, lacked any real substance to move the case forward. The pervasive sense of being watched lingered, an untraceable shadow, a feeling without a source. And the watch, that silent, rusted, moss-covered sentinel of time, sat in evidence, a constant, poignant reminder of a life abruptly cut off mid-stride. By the spring of 2005, the task force's initial surge of optimism began to wane, replaced by a growing weariness. They had the watch, a tangible link to the past, but not the man. They had an abundance of questions, but a scarcity of answers. And they had Anna, now a grown woman, a mother herself, who longed for more than artifacts. She yearned for truth. She wanted her father back, in any form, alive or at the very least accounted for. One thing, however, remained chillingly clear to the detectives. William Cartwright had not simply vanished into thin air. Someone, somewhere, held the terrifying key to why a father, after dropping his daughter at a party, had promised to return, and instead left behind only a car, a wallet, and a watch that would lie buried for a generation. They just didn't know who.
The summer of 2005 brought with it a familiar, melancholic echo in Grants Pass. William Cartwright's case, resurrected by the watch's reoccurrence, once again became the unsettling hum beneath daily conversations. Local newspapers, seized by the enduring mystery, ran anniversary articles, somber reminders of the father who had vanished in 1983 and the timepiece unearthed 21 years later from its silent, earthy tomb. For the town's older residents, it stirred a potent cocktail of memories. The frantic search parties, the faded flyers clinging to telephone poles, the gnawing, unanswered questions that had haunted them for decades. For the younger generation, it was a haunting story passed down through whispers,
a chilling local folklore that warned how even the most ordinary, safest places could, without warning, swallow someone whole. Anna, now a woman in her mid-30s, her own life woven with threads of resilient motherhood, chose that summer to speak publicly for the first time in years. She stood before a gathered press, her face etched with a quiet, fierce determination. In her hands, she clutched a framed photograph of her father, a younger William, his gentle smile frozen in time, the silver watch gleaming on his wrist. The very same watch, now rusted and silent, beneath the sterile glass of an evidence display. Her voice, though steady, was thick with emotion, a raw edge of grief and defiance. "This was the last gift I gave him," she said, each word a stone falling into the silence. "He never took it off. If they found it in the woods, that means he was there. That means someone else was too." Her words, unvarnished and deeply personal, cut through the clipped procedural tone of the investigators, piercing the detachment and reminding everyone that this was not merely a cold case file. This was her life, a gaping wound that refused to heal. Detectives, spurred by Anna's renewed plea and the public's rekindled interest, pressed forward with a grim resolve. Yet they found themselves slamming into the same impenetrable walls that had frustrated them back in 1983. Still no body, still no definitive crime scene, still no witness willing or perhaps able to place William with anyone suspicious. They re-interviewed men from the church softball team, old co-workers, even distant relatives, sifting through the dust of time, hoping for a forgotten detail to emerge. Nothing. A few mentioned vague rumors, William seen arguing with a stranger at a gas station days before he vanished, a nondescript pickup truck idling near the turnout more than once. But rumors, like mist, refused to hold in court. Without solid corroboration, they remained mere scribbles in the margins of aging reports, fleeting ghosts of possibility.
The community's frustration, a slow-burning ember, began to flare anew. Candlelight vigils flickered near the turnout where William's Oldsmobile had been discovered. Neighbors, their faces drawn with empathy, left bouquets of flowers, heartfelt handwritten notes, even their own wristwatches, poignant symbols of the time lost, the life cut short. The turnout itself, once just an ordinary patch of asphalt, transformed into a desolate shrine, marked by collective grief and an unspoken ritual of remembrance. Passing drivers slowed, some out of respect, others drawn by a morbid, irresistible curiosity. Investigators, though steeped in logic and evidence, were not blind to the raw power of such symbolism. They examined the recovered watch once more, their gaze lingering on the delicate engraving, "Love, Anna, 1983. It was more than just a gift. It was a timestamp, irrefutable proof that William had carried his daughter's love into the very last day anyone had seen him alive. One detective, a man hardened by years of unspoken tragedies, admitted privately, his voice barely a whisper, "It's like whoever put it under that tree wanted us to find it later," as if it were a message, carefully laid, patiently waiting. This unsettling idea that the watch was not just lost but placed disturbed them deeply. If the watch had been deliberately hidden, then its eventual discovery wasn't mere luck. It was part of a design, a chilling, long-game calculation. But if it had simply been torn away during a desperate struggle, then why hadn't the rest of his belongings, his keys, his wallet, the very clothes on his back, surfaced too? Why only the watch, 2 decades later, in a spot that Roots had so carefully concealed? Each new theory, rather than clarifying, only seemed to open another gaping contradiction in the narrative. Theories, wild and varied, spread through Grant's Pass like wildfire. Some believed William had stumbled upon illegal activity near the river,
Poachers, perhaps, or drug runners, desperate men with secrets worth protecting at any exact cost. Others clung to the more chilling idea of a drifter, a transient, violent stranger passing through town, leaving destruction in his wake. And a few, their voices barely audible, whispered darker suggestions that someone within the tight-knit community, someone known, someone trusted, had silenced him. These whispers never truly faded. In small towns, mystery, unresolved and unquiet, often blossoms into folklore, and folklore they knew possessed a stubborn, enduring power that could outlast any tangible evidence.
Anna, unwavering in her quest, pressed investigators relentlessly not to let the case fade back into the shadows. She penned impassioned letters to the governor, demanded state-level involvement, and vehemently pushed for advanced DNA testing on any remaining old evidence. Detectives, acknowledging her relentless resolve, obliged. The watch strap, a silent witness to William's last moments, was sent for analysis. The results, when they finally returned, were a bitter disappointment. Inconclusive. Too degraded, too contaminated by time and the elements for any clear profiles. The disappointment was sharp, a fresh cut, but not entirely surprising. Time, that most merciless of forces, erases traces faster than any investigator can preserve them. Despite the persistent lack of concrete answers, William's story began to pull in national attention. True crime programs, ever eager for a captivating narrative, requested interviews. A prominent magazine ran a feature titled "The Father Who Vanished," its pages filled with the familiar, haunting image of William. Reporters meticulously emphasized the ordinary nature of William's last known day, the routine YMCA drop-off, the simple promise to return at 6, and the neatly parked car at the turnout. Ordinary men don't just vanish, the article declared, its words echoing the town's own unspoken conviction. Something had to have happened. For Anna, this renewed attention was a cruel paradox, comforting because people still cared that her father was not forgotten, yet agonizingly cruel because every headline, every segment was a fresh, brutal reminder of what she had lost, of the void that remained. "When people ask me what closure would look like," she confided to one interviewer, "I don't even know anymore. I just want to know if he suffered. I just want to know if he thought of me."
Detectives, with weary but determined hearts, worked the case as best they could, meticulously re-examining every file, every statement. But by the close of 2005, the trail was cold once more. The watch had offered a fleeting spark, a flicker of hope in the darkness, but sparks, they knew, didn't always ignite fires. Without new witnesses, without William's physical remains, they had nothing tangible, nothing concrete to propel the investigation forward. The central paradox of William's disappearance remained stubbornly unchanged. A man vanishing in broad daylight from a public space, a car left with unsettling tidiness, and a watch buried as if the very earth itself had swallowed it whole. One detective, in a final, disheartened summary of the case, captured the enduring mystery. Cartwright's disappearance is defined by neatness. Car neat, life neat, exit neat. Only the watch is messy, and it came back to us 21 years too late. That chilling neatness haunted them all. It suggested intent, a precise, calculated act, something carefully hidden, and yet nothing visible. For Anna, the pain,
A constant, dull ache lingered. She found herself visiting the turnout less and less often, a heavy weight settling in her chest whenever she stood there. The air, she said, felt heavy, as if it knew more than it let on, a silent accomplice to the unspeakable. The hardest part, she confessed, wasn't accepting that her father was gone. It was living with the profound, suffocating silence that had replaced him, a silence that had lasted for over 20 years, broken only by the sudden brief gleam of a corroded watch unearthed from the earth. By the winter of 2006, William Cartwright's file had inevitably returned to its shelf in the cold case drawer. The watch, his last tangible link to Anna, was catalogued and sealed in a clear evidence bag, its poignant engraving still visible beneath the creeping corrosion. For the investigators, it served as a stark, ever-present reminder of the case they couldn't solve, the puzzle with missing pieces they couldn't find. For Anna, it remained the last tangible link to a father who had simply walked out of view, a familiar, beloved figure who had promised to return and never had. She kept a copy of the evidence photo on her dresser, a faded image of the watch itself. "It's not him," she would say, "but it's all I have left." Over the next years, William Cartwright's story, infused with an almost mythical quality, slowly became part of Oregon's quiet, haunting folklore. People mentioned it in passing, a cautionary tale whispered around campfires or discussed in hushed tones over coffee. Remember that father who vanished after dropping his daughter at a party? How his car was left so neat, like he'd planned to come right back, and how his watch was found buried under a tree 2 decades later? The case, with its chilling, unanswered questions, made appearances on late-night radio shows, true crime blogs, and eventually on television documentaries, each retelling keeping the agonizing mystery alive, but none, tragically, bringing any closer to answers. William Cartwright remained missing, a name without an ending, a life without a final chapter. Detectives who had worked the case, those who had carried its weight for years, consistently described the same unsettling unease, the baffling precision of his disappearance. Cars, in the chaotic aftermath of a crime, were usually abandoned violently, doors flung open, belongings scattered in disarray. But William's Oldsmobile had been parked neatly, meticulously locked, as if he fully intended to return within minutes. The turnout, a place that should have borne witness to struggle, showed no sign of panic, no disturbed earth. Even the highly trained search dogs had lost his scent within mere yards of the car, as if his trail had simply, unnervingly, ceased to exist. That calmness, one investigator, his voice heavy with years of frustration, said years later, "That's what unsettled us most. It was as if he stepped out and was swallowed whole. That doesn't happen in real life, but it happened to him." The watch remained the singular new piece of evidence, a silent, corroded enigma. Analysts endlessly speculated on how it had ended up beneath those gnarled roots. Perhaps William had struggled violently with someone, and it was torn from his wrist in the desperate fray. Perhaps the person responsible, in a moment of panic or callous disregard, had simply discarded it, not realizing the deeply personal, almost sacred significance it held. Or perhaps, the most chilling theory, it was left there deliberately, buried to surface much later, a grim, calculated reminder, a silent taunt across the years. None of these theories, however compelling, could ever be proven. The watch, in its eloquent silence, told only one undeniable truth. William was there, and then he wasn't.
For Anna, the relentless years rolled on. She married, built a family, and lovingly raised children of her own, teaching them about the grandfather they would never meet, the man whose absence had shaped her life. Every Father's Day, a bittersweet ritual, she placed fresh flowers by the turnout where his car had been found. In 2004, after the watch resurfaced, she added a new, poignant gesture, touching her own watch, a replica of his, whenever she felt his presence near, whenever the weight of memory became too heavy. "It's like carrying him with me," she explained to a journalist, her eyes distant. "The time he lost, I try to keep." In 2010, a final cold case review concluded with the same soul-crushing verdict: insufficient evidence to determine foul play, no body to confirm death. The file remained technically open, but only in name, a bureaucratic formality. No new witnesses ever came forward, no new objects ever surfaced from the earth or the river. The silence, thick and impenetrable, returned, heavier even than before. The watch, that small, rusted anchor to a vanished life, was displayed once more in a sheriff's office exhibit on unsolved cases, a solitary, corroded relic under glass. Visitors leaned close to read the faded engraving, their faces a mixture of sorrow and bewilderment. Some shook their heads in disbelief, others whispered theories, most simply walked away with the same haunting thought. How could a man vanish so completely, so utterly, leaving behind only echoes and a single silent timepiece?
Today, the turnout on River Road looks utterly ordinary once more. Cars pass by without slowing, their drivers unaware of the silent tragedy etched into the very soil beneath their wheels. The dense forest, an indifferent witness, stands unchanged, trees crowding the edges where search dogs once lost a scent. The earth where the watch was buried has long since settled, its surface smooth, its secrets well kept by nature's patient hand. But for those who know the story, for those who remember William Cartwright, that ground carries an undeniable weight. It is a place where a promise was shattered, where a father failed to return, where time itself seemed to pause, suspended in a moment of profound, inexplicable loss. William Cartwright's life ended not with violence anyone could see, not with a sudden, brutal act, but with the quiet, devastating finality of absence. A man defined by his steadiness, by his predictable rhythm, was erased by a single, ordinary afternoon. What remains is a watch, engraved by his daughter's loving hand, unearthed long after she had grown into a woman, into a mother. It ticks no more, but in its profound, rusted silence, it tells a story louder than any voice could articulate. A story that love, even in the face of absolute disappearance, leaves indelible marks that time itself cannot truly erase.
Thanks for watching. We'll uncover the next mystery together in the next Vanish story.